Okay, so here we have the prayer, which we begin with, okay, which allows us to, which sort of like gives us the right direction of how we want to learn, okay, and we don't want to learn in order to be, tremendously knowledgeable. That's not the point of learning Kabbalah. The reason that we learn is to enable us to connect with God more easily, enable to us to understand what our work is, enable us to understand how to move forwards and in our service to God, in our service to each other. So this is actually the reason why we learn Kabbalah, and I think that's very much echoed in this prayer, which comes from the Ari, the Holy Ari. Okay, so Ribon Olamim v'Adonai Adonim, Avrahaman v'Slichot, modim anachnu lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avotenu, בקידה ובהשתחוויה, שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש. ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומי חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחור ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ואל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך. וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן לבבינו לראתך ולבדך, ותקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ויהיה לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כסי כבודך כרך ניחוח, ותציל עלינו אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, ושנוצצו ניצוצות עבדיך הקדושים, אשר ידם גלית דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם, וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם, ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבן לקשר בדברים אלו. ובזכותם תהיה עינינו במה שאנו לומדים, כמאמר נעים זירות ישראל, גל עיניי והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני ייתן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לו רצון ימי פי, ויגון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. Master of the universe and Lord of lords, Father of mercy and forgiveness, we give thanks to you, O Lord our God and God of our fathers, bowing the head and prostrating ourselves, that you brought us close to your Torah and to your service, the holiest of services, and you've given us a portion of the inner meanings of your holy Torah. What are we and what is our life, that you've dealt with us such a great loving kindness as this? And therefore we lay our supplication before you, that you forgive and pardon all our sins and iniquities, and do not let our iniquities to separate us from you. And may it be your will, O Lord our God and God of our fathers, that you prepare our hearts to have reverence of you and love of you, and may your ears listen to these our words. Open our uncircumcised heart in the inner meanings of your Torah, and may this learning give pleasure before the throne of your glory as a sweet-smelling fragrance. Bestow upon us the light of the source of our soul in all its aspects, and may the sparks of your holy servants, through whom you revealed these your words into the world, shine forth, and may their merit, the merit of their fathers, the merit of their Torah, their wholeness and holiness, stand by us, that we do not stumble in these words. And through their merit enlighten our eyes in what we are learning. As the sweet singer of Israel said, open my eyes, and I will look on the wonders of your Torah, for the Lord gives wisdom from his mouth, knowledge and understanding. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Okay, so everybody welcome, everybody who's here, everybody welcome. Okay, and we're going to learn today why we blow the shofar and what is some of the symbolism that we have around Rosh Hashanah. Okay, and these symbols can be quite difficult if we don't actually understand what they're about. All right, so in order to understand what Rosh Hashanah is about, we need to actually have a look in the Zohar. Okay, the Zohar really helps, okay, to understand what Rosh Hashanah is about, because when we understand it, then we understand the symbolism as well. We absolutely get a new take on the whole thing. All right, so we're going to actually start with a piece of Zohar, okay? And as we get that piece of Zohar underway, we'll discuss it as we go along. All right. So, oh wait a minute, I need to share my screen again. Share screen so we can see the piece of Zohar together. Okay, so anybody who's not used to looking at a page of Zohar, all right, this is the Aramaic is at the top. That's the actual words of the Zohar itself. Okay, and can everybody see the Zohar? Because I'm not very good at this screen sharing thing. If it's not the Zohar,
we can see.
huh?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, because sometimes I share the wrong bit or I can't see what we're doing or something. Okay, so here's the piece of Zohar. All right, so we've got the Zohar at the top, which is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay, the channeling Zohar. And here underneath, we've got the Pirusha Sulam. You see, it says the word Sulam there, which is Rabbi Ashlag's explanation. And it's absolutely brilliant. So as we go along, we'll start to see some of these symbols and we discover what they mean. We're also going to discover why we blow the shofar. All right, so we'll start off. And it starts off with, you know, a rather cryptic piece, okay, which we're going to go into. Ta chazi, kegavna da, v'yom Rosh Hashanah, v'yom HaKippurim, Dedina ishtakach ba'olma, ihu kaim lekaptoga, v'yisol bayan lit'ara b'shofar, ulit'ara kol, dekalil ba'esha, umaya v'rucha. V'tavidu dachad lashma'a hahu kol migo shofar. Tahazi, come and see. Ka'en ze b'yom Rosh Hashanah. Come and see. It's like this on the day of your Rosh Hashanah and the day of Yom Kippur. Shehadin nimtza az ba'olam. When the din, the judgment, is to be found in the world. V'asatan omed az lekatreg. And the Satan then stands to accuse. She'Israel tzrichim az litorer b'shofar. Then Israel needs to awaken with a shofar, lo'er kol, and awaken a voice, hakalul mimayim esh v'ruach, which is made up of water, fire, and air, shem chesed gvur tiferet, which are the three sfirot, chesed gvur tiferet, shnasu be'echad, and they become one, ulashmir to kol mitoch hashofar, and to bring out that voice from the shofar. Now, in this short paragraph, you see quite a lot of that symbols already. Okay, we have the word judgment, we have Satan, okay, and we have the shofar, okay, and what on earth does this mean? Nobody likes these words. These words are scary, and they've got, you know, people feel that they're being judged, they don't like it, it's horrible, and nobody feels that. And in fact, the actual truth is very, very different, okay? So what is the din? What does the judgment mean? All right, what is it about? So this is what we're going to look at, okay? And then hopefully we'll see things in a much more friendly light. Perush, explanation. Yud bet chodshei shana im tinkun malchut mitchilata ad sofa. The 12 months of the year are actually the time when we rectify the malchut. The malchut is the sphira which we all belong to. Another name for the malchut is the Shekhinah. Okay, it's the indwelling part of ourselves, the indwelling God within ourselves. Okay, and it's also the word governance. All right, malchut is governance. It's how do we conduct ourselves. All right, sometimes we're in accordance with the Shekhinah, we're in affinity of form with her. The Shekhinah is thriving through our love for God and our love for our created beings. And other times we also use our will to receive for itself alone, which is the other aspect of the malchut, that we can take that desire to receive and use it for ourselves alone. And that actually causes the Shekhinah is called the Shekhinah is in the dust. All right, when we're not paying attention properly, when we bring in sins, when we bring in mistakes, and we get all sorts of distortions. So in the 12 months of the year, we're busy working with that, you know, that to and fro. Are we in accordance with our soul? are in accordance with our will to receive for ourselves alone. And since the tikkun is not going to be finished completely until we reach the end of the tikkun, which according to the sages is close, so therefore each year we need to come again and rectify the malchut, like work with it again, okay? Which is why, the energy is that it's called the cycle of the year, the circle of the year, ma'agal hashana. That each as we go through the months of the year, we have the days, we have the weeks, we have the Parshat Shavua comes again, we have the festivals come again. We go through the same energies, okay? And each time we're adding something to the tikkun that we've already done. So you could say, well, we've done Rosh Hashanah last year, we've done Rosh Hashanah the year before. Why do we have to do Rosh Hashanah again? And the answer is that the cycle continues. We go round again, and each time we add to what we've done before. Okay, so it's like a new opportunity, a new way of working. All right? So, so each year we again come back round the same cycle to rectify the malchut, to work with it, okay? The neshama, the soul within us, okay? So every Rosh Hashanah we start the tikkun again from the beginning. Now, look at the word Rosh Hashanah. All right, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the spiritual entity, which is called the Shana. Okay, there's a chat, somebody saying something. Oh yeah, can I please explain what the Shekhinah is? Yes, definitely. Thank you for asking. Well, we've got God, okay, the Creator, and we actually have the Creator, the Ein Sof, all right, and we also have that in the Ein Sof we've got the light, which is the highest light of God, and we've got the vessel which receives that light, and in the Ein Sof they are one, and the Shekhinah is actually the vessel, all right, and the souls are part of the Shekhinah, part of that vessel which is there in the Ein Sof, and we devolve down through the spiritual worlds, retaining the soul within us. So we have that essence of God, which we gained in the Ein Sof, all right, and it goes down through all the spiritual worlds until it lands inside the body. Okay, and each person is a unique aspect of that, has that unique soul, that unique aspect of the Malchut within himself or herself. And then, of course, if you were to join up all the little individual bits, you would have the collective soul of humanity, and that's actually the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the collective of all the aspects of God which are situated inside each one of us. Is that okay? Is that good enough? That help
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So here's the Malchut, all that aspect, all that little, bits of soul which are of who we are, essence of God within us, and it actually needs rectification. All right. And we need to work with it. Why? Because we've got the soul, and also another part of the Malchut, which all the Malchut leads to, is also the will to receive. The will to receive, which we can use for ourselves alone. But when we do that, we separate from God. Because why? Because God is all giving. And when we receive for ourselves alone, we separate from him, because we're not together with him. If we can be giving also either to God or to our fellow human being, then we're what's called in affinity of form with him. All right? and we don't separate. And that's the aspect that we need to look at. So Rosh Hashanah is the Rosh, is the head aspect of the Shana. It's the potential. It's why there's so much emphasis on it, is because basically it's kind of like the potential of the year. All right, we want to think about how we want our year to unfold. We want to think about how we want our relationship to God to unfold during the year. Okay, and so it's the Rosh, it's the beginning, okay, of what's going to unfold throughout the year. It's like the thought, which during the year we're going to try to put into practice. So this is actually, so it's a very important festival, because it's the time when we can really go into ourselves and really consider how we want our relationship to God to unfold during the year. Now, Rosh Hashanah, anu matchilim mibereshit tikkun u'malchut. So from the Rosh Hashanah, we again begin the tikkun of the Malchut, of the Shekhinah, of our souls, of who we are, from the beginning. And the Zohar takes the stance that the world, that Rosh Hashanah falls on the 4th day of creation. Okay, just as it came forth on the 4th day of creation. Now, if you look in, different aspects of the oral law, the Torah Shebaal Peh, you'll find different ideas of when Rosh Hashanah is. Some people say the day that Adam and Eve were created. Some say, I think that's the one I've heard, when Adam and Eve were created, or when that was the day when they ate from the tree of knowledge. I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of different interpretations. Okay, but the Zohar takes the view that we're looking at the 4th day of creation. Okay, so let's go and see what happened on the 4th day of creation. So I'm going to, oh wait a minute, I need to, 1 second, stop share there. That's right. I'm getting slowly better at this. Slowly. And I forgot to get that one up earlier, but you never know. Okay, now, can you see Bereshit? Can you see Genesis there?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so if we zoom down to the 4th day of creation, what do we have? V'yom Elohim hi ma'orot b'kei hashamayim. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, lavdil ben hayom u'ben halayla, to divide between the day and the night, vayul otot u'moadim u'leyamim v'shanim, and they will be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Vayul ma'orot b'kei hashamayim, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, la'ir al ha'aretz, to give light on the earth. Vayhi chen, and it was so. Vayas Elohim et shnei ha'ma'orot ha'gdolim, and God made the 2 great lights. Et ha'ma'or ha'gadol, to the greater light to rule the day, u'memshet hayom, to rule the day, et ha'ma'or ha'katon u'memshet halayla, and the little light to rule the night, vet ha'kochavim, and the stars. All right? Now, the sages noticed something very interesting. They noticed that you start off this sentence with 2 great lights, and you finish the sentence with 1 great light and 1 little light. Okay? So something's happened on this day. You've got 2 great lights. Something's happened between the beginning of the sentence and the end of the sentence. Okay? We're starting off with 2 great lights, and you end the sentence with 1 big one and 1 little one. Okay? So, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So if we go back to Zohar again. Okay. He says the energy that comes forth on the fourth day of creation, which is what happens on Rosh Hashanah, is that God made two big lights. She'az hayta b'shleimut gimel shonot ha'ata small. Now, what does this mean? It means, don't worry about the technical aspects, those of you who can understand a bit of Hebrew. What does it mean? It means that the Malchut, the Sfirah that we're dealing with, the Shekhinah, is actually able to receive a tremendous amount of light. Okay? Huge amount of light. Alright? Gimel Shonot means receiving a large light. Small is in its will, is in its vessel for receiving. Shusud Harat Shuruk. Okay, which means that the light is actually present in the Malchut. But there's a problem. Dahainu Chochma Beli Chasadim. It's the great light of the creation, but it doesn't have the light of giving. Now, that's okay up to a point, but it's a big problem actually, because the Malchut actually needs the light to be lesser, and it needs to be wrapped with the light of giving in order to give it to the created beings. If the light is too great, what's liable to happen? We're liable to receive it for ourselves alone. Because receiving for ourselves alone is not actually confined to physical or emotional things, as we tend to think, in our daily lives. The biggest receiving for ourselves alone is actually to receive this God's light. I mean, that's when when we do that, that's really a bit disastrous. Okay, it's a bit like what Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. All right, they tried to eat from the tree of knowledge, big light, okay, for the sake of giving pleasure to God, but ultimately they found it was too much for them, and they received from themselves alone. Okay, so when this great light is present in the stage, is present, it's actually a little problematic. It's actually a bit dangerous in a sense. Why? Because there's kind of like an accusation. There's a problem. What does it mean, that accusation? It means, the human beings might receive that for themselves alone. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why on Rosh Hashanah it's very important to be kind to everybody, to greet people, to be loving to people, not worrying about am I doing things right or am I doing things wrong, just to be not to be strict, but to be loving. Okay, because it's very important that we are giving and loving on Rosh Hashanah to each other. That's one of the reasons why we send out blessings. We give each other blessings, send out Rosh Hashanah cards. Okay, we want to bless each other with a good and sweet new year. We want to wrap this big light with giving. Okay, all right. Okay, so Valkenkit to Galavana, and so the Malchut is saying, this light's too big. If I get this light, it's not going to work. That's basically what it's saying. She cannot deal with the lack of giving, the lack of the light of giving, the lack of the joy of giving. All right? And that's the inner meaning of this symbol of the accusation of the Satan. This is the idea of the din. Because what's the din? The judgment. The judgment means that we're not allowed to receive this great light for the sake for ourselves. Okay? And if we do receive it for ourselves alone, that causes a lot of suffering in the world, because we've become separated from God, and we've come into affinity of, and we've come into opposition of form from God. Okay, so that's the accusation. That's the idea of the judgment. And that's, we could receive it for ourselves alone, and the accusation is that the Malchut, we might take that light for ourselves alone. So long as this huge light is shining there in the Malchut. So what are we going to do? We can't stop this light. It comes into the world on Rosh Hashanah. Okay? We can't stop it. So there's a bit of a problem. Okay? So we need to deal with it. We need to deal with this light. Okay? Because otherwise we could easily, we'd be like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and we're liable to receive it for ourselves alone. It really is a huge light. So what do we do? So God told us what to do. He said, sound the shofar. What does the shofar do? The shofar lessens the light and wraps it with the joy of giving. Okay? All right? So that's the very important work that we do. Now, I honestly believe that we're not just doing it for the people of Israel or for ourselves. We do it for the world. This energy, this big light comes into the world. All right? So Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, have been given this incredible role to play, that we can sound the shofar, and this has a double role. What does it do? What do we need to do to stop this accusation that we're going to use this great light for ourselves, that we're going to take it for ourselves? What do we need to do? First of all, we need to lessen the light. All right? We need to let it be much, much, much smaller. Okay? And this action that we do is to make the sound through the shofar, to bring forth this love that we want to give to God, the giving to God through the shofar. Okay, now I saw that there was a chat. What does it say? When you say that shofar lessens the light, do you mean make it more compact? No, I actually mean make it less. Hannah, it actually means that we let's give an example. That it's much easier to explain with an example than me try to sort of like explain things. Let's take a very famous example. When Moses, was in the wilderness, and he'd run away from Egypt, he'd run away from Pharaoh, and he's wandering in the wilderness, and he comes across the burning bush. All right, so the burning bush is again a example of the great light of God. All right, he sees this bush, he wanders over, is curious, what is this? And suddenly he hears the voice of God coming out of this bush. So he's actually receiving a very big light of God at that moment. I mean, how many of us can actually say we've heard the voice of God? It's colossal. So what does he do? The first thing he does is he hides his face. All right, that's the very first thing he does, is he hides his face. So he lessens the light. What does he mean? He gives it back. He says, no, this light's too big. I don't want to take anything which I can't handle. So he hides his face. All right. And that's actually the correct thing to do. So what do you mean when we lessen the light, when we blow the shofar? What we're actually doing is we're doing something similar. Okay, we're lessening that big light, we're bringing it down to, more manageable size. And what we're doing is we're sweetening it with the great love that Bina has. Bina is the Sphira of giving. Bina is the Sphira which says, I want to give. I'm not, Bina's not interested in receiving. Bina is interested in giving. Okay? So what do we do when we blow the shofar? We actually give our love to God. We say, no, God, I don't want to be just receiving. I don't want to receive a big light. That might take me into separation from you. I don't want to risk it. I want to join it with the desire to give. Okay, and this is in fact the advice of what we do when we blow the shofar. God tells us to start by giving, and that is the shofar. What do I think the purpose is of too much light being sent before being diminished? Well, it's a reenaction of the light of how the energy of the creation of the world, because the creation of the world starts from the great desire of God to give goodness to the created beings. That's the purpose of creation. Okay, but in the Ein Sof, the vessel, which is the Malchut, said, I want to be not, and in the Ein Sof, in fact, the vessel was actually receiving this great light. It was receiving it, but that was okay in the Ein Sof. But then the vessel, which is the Malchut, said, I want to be in more affinity of form with the Creator. I want to, out of love, I want to be more giving, not just receiving. So it's actually a decision that the Malchut made. Okay? And I think that what happens is that we rededicate ourselves. We remake that decision each time. So the world goes back, it said, to its former state, and we rededicate. Okay? You have to have a reason to rededicate. Okay? You can't just sort of like decide, what's the reason why we rededicate? So the reason is because that light of the fourth day of creation has come into the world, and we need to rededicate ourselves to giving. And when we do that, we looked at the idea that Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the whole year, and it sort of sets the tone for the whole year. So when that big light comes in, we actually work with it, and we say, no, it's too big. What we need to do is to make that decision to join it with loving kindness, to wrap it with loving kindness. Okay? All right? Okay, good. Now then. So what's the action we do? We sound the shofar. Okay? Isn't that lovely? And what does the shofar give us? Well, it gives us it says in general, there are two types of sounds. One is the Malchut, which is not sweetened with Bina, which would be on its own. And one would be Bina, or the voice of Bina, or Malchut, which is sweetened with Bina. And then its sound is as the sound of Bina. Its voice is like the voice of Bina. Okay? All right. So the voice that comes out of the shofar is the voice of compassion. It's the voice of giving. It's the voice of giving unconditionally. It's the voice of love. And this is really what we are aiming for. So that on Rosh Hashanah, we put our emphasis on giving and on love. Okay? So the shofar, the blowing of the shofar, is not just, the symbol with which we start the new year. It's actually got a profound meaning, which is to bring love into the world. Okay? 1 second. Sorry, I'll just have a drink. It's very hot here. All right. Now, so what does it mean? How do we do this? How does Bina work? Shusod hamasach dechirik shalav yotzei kav emtzei haimeched shnei kavim yamin u'shmol zeh b'zeh. What actually happens is, first of all, we say no to the big light. Okay. We put a barrier to that big light, and comes forth the 3 lines. We look at ourselves, we're made up of a left-hand line, a right-hand line, and a middle line. Okay? If we look at very often in Judaism, you have the idea of the 3. You have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? You have 3 matzahs on Seder night. There's lots of Kohen, Levi, Israel, with lots and lots and lots of the motive of the 3, okay, in Judaism. All right, and what these actually stand for, each one of them, or Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. What they stand for is the right-hand line, which is the side of giving. That's Abraham. Abraham was just Chesed, just loving, just giving. Yitzhak is the left-hand line. Yitzhak is the vessels of receiving. And those are the ones which are problematic. Those are the ones which need tikkun, because we could use those for ourselves alone. And in fact, that's what actually happened with Esau. Esau had vessels of receiving, just like Yitzhak, but he used them for himself alone. All right? So Yitzhak is the vessels of receiving. They're very important, the vessels of receiving. It's not that we don't need them or whatever, but we need to use them carefully. For example, they're the vessels which make up our ego. Our ego is important. We couldn't function without an ego in the world. We need our ego. Nevertheless, if we do it too much, we go into egoism. We get our will to receive for ourselves alone, and we go into egoism. So the vessels of Yitzhak are actually really the ones which we need to do the tikkun on Rosh Hashanah. So here we get the Akedah of Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac. And the Zohar tells us that the binding of Isaac and the blowing of the shofar actually have the same energy. When we blow the shofar, we're like binding that big light, okay? And we're changing it only for the sake of giving. So that's what that great tikkun that Isaac did, Yitzhak did, is actually the tikkun is the same. Akedah of Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac, is the same as blowing the shofar. It's the same energy. And in fact, we discover that the Yitzhak is completely bound up in the festival in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah, we have the birth of Yitzhak, the first day, which deals with the formation of the Malchut. The second day of Rosh Hashanah, we have Akedat Yitzhak. We read Akedat Yitzhak, which is the binding of Isaac. On Yom Kippur, we also have the Tikkun of Yom Kippur is connected very much with the Kelim of Yitzhak, and so is Sukkot as well. Okay, so the shofar, do you remember in the story of Yitzhak, okay, Abraham is about to offer Yitzhak up as a sacrifice, and the angel calls out from heaven and says, Abraham, you know, don't stretch out your hand to the lad, and now I see that you fear God. And what does Abraham do? He looks around and he sees a ram caught in the thicket by his horn, and that's like the original shofar, that we say that the shofar is the ram's horn, which Abraham used to offer up instead of Yitzhak. So that's another aspect of the symbolism of the shofar. So we have the right hand line is Abraham, the left hand line is Yitzhak, and by blowing the shofar we bring out the middle line, which is the line of compassion, which is Jacob. So right hand is Chesed, left hand is Gevurah, and the middle line is Rachamim. Another way to call it is Chesed Din for Rachamim. So it's the when we do that, when we blow the shofar, the Zohar tells us, and again it's very sort of poetical, full of imagery, is that it's like he says that God moves from the kisei of Din to the kisei of Rachamim. Doesn't mean that God was like just wanting to give judgment to his created beings. Not at all. But it simply means that that light, which was very big, as is causes on its own a possibility of receiving for itself alone, and we need to do the action of blowing the shofar in order to bring it through to Rachamim. Okay? And what do we find? We find that this sound of the shofar is made up of fire, water and air. And that's what we said earlier, that it's made up of these three lines and they all function together. Okay? And they become, these three lines unite and become one. And then when that happens, when we blow the shofar and we unite these three lines, because they've all now in affinity of form, when we've wrapped that malchut with bina, we're blowing that sound of bina out into the world, okay, then those three lines are now united with each other and compassion can come forth. Okay, now is there any questions? It's quite difficult material, so I'm very proud of you all if you're all following. Let's just stop the share for a moment. All right, let's get to see your face. Oh, well, see your faces. Anybody got any questions? Are you managing with this material? It's quite difficult, but I think it's fascinating because it really takes those symbols and helps us look at them in a very different way, which I think is just amazing. All right, much more loving, much more to understand where they came from, and to actually understand that they are bringing us to love, bringing us to compassion. It's not at all about judgment or punishment or anything like that. Okay, so Nicole's asked a question. There are three types of sounds in the shofar. Do these correspond to specific aspects? Yes, absolutely. So you've got the Tkiyah, you've got the Shvarim, and you've got the Truah. Now, you've asked me a very, very, very interesting question. And the answer is yes, they do. But the answer is, do I know what they are? The answer is no, I'm sorry, I don't. I do know that you have all the different starim, you know, where they blow the shofar, you know, it goes do, you know, as a tekiah, and then you've got shvarim, do 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 do. No, shvarim is do do do, and then you've got the truah, which is do 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 do, and then you've got tekiah again. And I know that you've got different arrangements of chesed and gevurah, and the middle line in Tiferet, so it's Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, and I know you've got different arrangements of those, and they do have meaning, but it's very complicated, and I've tried to learn it in the past, and I've never managed it. So the answer is yes, you're right, Nicole. There are different types of sounds in the shofar, and they do correspond to specific aspects. But I'm sorry, I'm not up to telling you precisely what they are. Okay. There's a big Zohar in Parshat Emor, which goes into it in incredible detail, but I've never managed it so far. Does the binding of Yitzhak also represent Avram's giving back his son, not receiving for himself alone, so to speak? That's an interesting question, Devorah. Apparently, the Zohar tells us that the Akedah, Avraham was all chesed, okay? He was the right-hand side. So when he actually had to do the Akedah, he actually had to be included with Gevurah. So it was a tikkun for Avraham to come to the middle line, because he had to add in that Gevurah. Whereas for Yitzhak, it was the other way around. Yitzhak was all Gevurah, and he had to become more chesed. So it was a tikkun for both of them. And no, I don't think it was not receiving for himself alone, because we know that it wasn't, because, you know, it says, Vayash came Avram Baboke. The moment God said to him, this is what I want you to do, he just, you know, zoomed straight up and, you know, went off to do it, you know, first thing in the morning, which is just incredible. So it's not the tikkun of the will to receive for himself alone. It was a different type of tikkun, which was to give Avraham a type of wholeness which he didn't have before. He had the midah of chesed very strongly, but he didn't have the midah of gevurah so much. And this was what it was apparently needed for him to do. It was the final test. He had 10 tests. It's unbelievable. Okay. So, okay. And Rochelle said, I thought the blowing of the shofar had an effect on the Satan as it makes its case in judgment. Yeah, well, okay, that's right, absolutely. But who's the Satan? Okay? Who's the Satan? The Satan is the will to receive for ourselves alone. All right? All these different aspects of din and Satan and all the judgment and things are all aspects within ourselves. All right? There's nobody out there accusing. It's the aspects within ourselves that we've got that will to receive for ourselves alone. Okay? And it's basically saying, if you receive this great light for yourselves alone, you're going to fall into the hands of the other side, the hands of the Satan, whatever, which is just sort of a outer projection of what's inside of us. Okay? So yes, it absolutely does. The blowing of the shofar absolutely has a tremendous effect on the Satan of that will to receive for ourselves alone. Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely does that, Rochelle. Yeah, you got it right. You really did. One of the symbols of Rosh Hashanah, which is another one, is the idea of the books. Okay? You know that God opens books on Rosh Hashanah, the book of life. Okay? God forbid the book of death, whatever. Now, Rav Ashlag teaches that we write ourselves in the books. The book is our soul, okay? There's no book up there in space. Our soul is the book. The soul has a record of everything we've done during the year, okay? And so we what do we want? We want our connection with God to continue to be alive and thriving and living. So we want to write our connection with God into the book of life, okay? And the book of death is we want our will to receive for ourselves alone to be in the book of death. We don't want it to carry on being separated from God. We don't want these sins and distortions and rebellious acts that we've been doing, which separate us from God, make us feel bad. We don't want that anymore. So we're quite happy to let them go. And so we say, okay, write those bits in the book of death. That would be perfect. Okay? So the book of life and the book of death are things of both aspects which we ourselves want. Okay? We want to be connected with God. We want to be giving to our fellow human being. We want to be in giving and loving. So we write ourselves in the book of life. The good parts of ourselves we want to love. And the bits that we want to let go of, our anger or our lust or our irritability or whatever it happens to be. Everybody's got their own little pekanach, okay? And it's the bits we want to let go of. We say, okay, God, just help me let them go, okay? And that's what the Book of Life and the Book of Death is about, okay? Great. All right, now then. Okay. I think we've got time just for one more. All right. Shinpei bet. Well, we'll see how we go. Vahu kol salka adata de korsia de dina yatva batashpa vasalka de kevanda mata he kol mitata kol de Yaakov itatkan la ela v'kod shabrichu it arachamei de haka gavned Yisrael mitarei letata kol chad kalil be'esha v'rucha maya de nafke kachada migo shofar hachinami ita la ela shofar vahu kol de kalil be'esha maya v'rucha itatkan unefakta mitata mitveda me'ela v'datkan olma v'chamei ishtakachu. This is really beautiful. That's it, here we are. And this voice goes up to that consciousness of the throne of God, okay, of that left-hand line, of that will to receive, of that great light there, and it hits it, and it lessens that great light. And then the Malchut, which is the governance, okay, the Shekhinah, leaves that throne of judgment and comes to the throne of mercy. So it's, again, it's not about some throne up in the sky, it's about the energy pattern, okay? We're leaving judgment alone, we're not going there, we're going to compassion, we're going to mercy, we're going to love, which is the middle line, okay? And as this sound raises up from the created beings, from us, from below, which is the sound of Jacob, then this sound of Jacob, the middle line, is also rectified in the higher spiritual worlds, okay? And what is this? It's the light, it's the level of joy of giving, it's the joy of loving kindness, comes out from that sound that we do, okay, which is the middle line, which is Tiferet, which is Jacob, and it's compassion. And then the Holy Blessed One, this high, which is the spiritual world above us, awakens in compassion. Because when Israel awaken to do this work of uniting the right-hand line and the left-hand line and the middle line in compassion, which is the voice of Bina, then the higher spiritual worlds, Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, also awakens in compassion, okay? Because what we do below affects what happens above. All right? And this voice is made up of fire, water, and air, which comes forth from the shofar. And as we awaken it from us, from here below, then the higher shofar awakens above, which is Bina. It's the voice of Bina. And the power to sound the shofar is Aish, is fire, and the voice which issues from it is Ruach, which is air, and with the air comes forth water vapor, which is the water. And these elements, okay, awaken the three lines above, which in Bina, which is the right-hand line, the left-hand line, and the middle line. Okay, and then when they're awakened in Bina, then the light can come down in a proper way, in a balanced way, to the Zerampin and to the Malchut, which are the Zerampin is the one above us, and the Malchut, which is us. Okay, and we're now able to receive the light instead of getting this huge, big light, which is dangerous and unbalanced. We've now got a balanced light, which is safe and which is balanced and is in the will to receive only for the sake of giving, and it is united with compassion. Okay? Who called the Khalil Ba'esha V'maya V'ruchi Tatkan? And so this voice, which is made up, a voice of Bina, which is made up of these three lines, is rectified. And the voice which came up from, which went up from below, that's us, causes the light to come from above, and the world is rectified in love and in compassion, and compassion is to be found. Okay? So this is absolutely, you know, the great work that we do on Rosh Hashanah. And I hope that, you know, this learning from the Zohar has helped us look at these symbols in a, you know, in a better way, in a more loving way, in a compassionate way, to understand what we're doing, and actually in a joyous way, because Rosh Hashanah is meant to be a very joyous festival. Now, I grew up, you know, in England, in the Ashkenazi community, and it wasn't very joyous at all there. What can I tell you? But in Israel, I go to a Tunisian shul, the Eidot HaMizrach, and they have a lovely time. We all have a very nice time. It's very joyous, and that joy, for me, absolutely transformed Rosh Hashanah. So we really need to be grateful for the opportunity to sound the shofar, to be happy with what we're doing, to be joyous that we're able to bring that voice of compassion into the world, joyous to have the opportunity, okay? And we're simply letting go of the negative, all right, and joining with the positive. And that's what Rosh Hashanah should be, and it actually is about in its inner essence. Okay? All right, any more? Let's stop the share now.